At 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome, this is Real Britain with me, Emily Carver, on TV, radio and online. Now today, we'll be looking at how we can fix broken Britain. Do you even agree Britain is broken? We'll also take a look at the legacy of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. It's a mixed bag, that's for sure. And what impact is the cost of living crisis having on our furry friends? It's having a big impact on pet owners, apparently, and I'll be joined in the studio, of course, by the writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters. But first, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. The news at 2 o'clock on GB News. Police investigating the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool have warned anyone withholding information is protecting killers. The 9-year-old girl was shot by a gunman who chased his intended target into her home in Liverpool on Monday. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of murder have now been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are urging the public to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
Well, in other news today, a huge package of financial support has been promised by the government to help struggling households through the energy crisis. The Prime Minister's written an article in the Daily Mail where he acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering and the next few months are going to be tough. He said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. Well, the 2 Tory leadership candidates are yet to reveal exactly how they plan to ease the cost of living crisis. Rishi Sunak's team has criticised reports that Liz Truss plans to cut VAT by 5%, describing it as incredibly regressive. It's understood the Foreign Secretary has discussed a nuclear option with her advisers, which would reportedly save the average household more than £1,300 a year. Mr Sunak's campaign says the move would cost more than £30 billion. Meanwhile, Ms Truss has vowed to bolster Britain's defences if she becomes Prime Minister, saying the era of complacency is over. She wants to push ahead with renewing Trident and strengthen support for intelligence services as part of her plan to protect the UK. Retired British Army officer Major General Tim Cross told GB News, with Russia a continued threat, Britain does need to reconsider its defence and foreign policies.
Over these last 20 years, we have become complacent. We never really put sufficient resources in terms of military into Iraq or Afghanistan. And we weren't prepared to stay there for the length of time that we had been involved in, for example, the Cold War. So I think we have been complacent, and what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, and indeed elsewhere, I mean, autocracies, dictatorships, China and so on, has made people realise that we do need to think again about how we're going to engage in not just defence policy, but foreign policy and other aspects of our external relationships as well.
More than 25,000 migrants have now crossed the English Channel. That's so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted yesterday. The Ministry of Defence saying they were on board 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey from France. A father who was jailed for torturing his son has had his release from prison blocked. Little Tony Hudgell was so badly abused by his parents that he needed to have both his legs amputated. Anthony Smith was due to be released next month, but his case was referred to the parole board under new powers to protect the public from dangerous offenders. Tony's adoptive mother has welcomed the intervention. The Brexit minister is planning to sell off £1.5 billion worth of government offices in central London. Jacob Rees-Mogg told the Sunday Telegraph taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for buildings that are underutilised, with many civil servants still working from home. He's due to publish a property strategy that will see staff operating in fewer buildings as part of a network of government hubs. And Europe's biggest street festival is back after a 2-year break. Millions of people are expected to attend the Notting Hill Carnival in West London today, which has been postponed because of the pandemic. The event celebrates a fusion of Caribbean, African and European cultures, today being Family Day. It's time for the Children's Parade today and, of course, lots of music. Notting Hill ends tomorrow with the adults putting on a colourful show for all. That's it, you with GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Emily.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Real Britain with me, Emily Carver. So here's what's coming up on this show. Now, we're seeing crime all over the country. We're deep into a cost of living crisis. Energy bills are skyrocketing. We know all that, but I'll be asking, how do we fix broken Britain? Also, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, he's still our Prime Minister, is due to step down next month. He's dealt with plenty of turmoil during his tenure. I'll be joined by the leader of Reform UK to discuss what legacy Boris is leaving behind. And the cost of living crisis isn't just hitting us, it's hitting our pets too. RSPCA workers have apparently been inundated with calls as people have to choose between feeding themselves and feeding their pets. We'll get some advice on what to do if you're in the same boat. We'll also be solving the palaver with me, Emily Carver. Your views are, of course, much more important than mine. Today, I want to know your thoughts. Is Britain broken? Or are you perhaps of a generation where you think, you know what, we've been through worse, let's all pull our socks up, stop complaining and just get on with it? Or, on the other hand, maybe you feel badly let down by our government and indeed our entire political class. Let me know what you think. Tweet me at GBNews, or of course you can email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be reading out all of your comments later in the show. Remember, you can watch us online too on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook. You'll find lots of brilliant content there on the GB News page. Thank you very much for watching. Britain is brilliant at smashing records. We kicked off the Industrial Revolution, we invented the steam engine, we even discovered evolution. Sadly, these days, it's all the wrong records we're breaking. From illegal immigration to NHS waiting lists, it's no longer hyperbole to say that Britain is broken. And what are our leaders doing? It seems we're more likely to see them at the beach than we are to see them grafting. The lights may be on, but nobody seems to be at home. Take the government's utter failure to get to grips with channel crossings, which have recorded a record high of more than 25,000 this year alone. The equivalent of the population of Bishop Auckland, Rickmansworth or Skegness just rocking up at our shores, seemingly undeterred by any of the government's half-baked attempts to stop them. I mean, really, if the government can't even be trusted to protect our borders, God knows how they're going to deal with the omni-crisis we face. Because elsewhere, we're smashing yet more records, aren't we? Record NHS waiting lists, record A&E waiting times, record numbers of people failing to get seen by a doctor, all while record amounts of our money is being pumped into a failing system. This all comes against a backdrop of rising crime, crippling housing costs, ballooning energy bills, striking unions, and small businesses struggling to keep their doors open. You'd think that at a time of crisis, our politicians would put their holidays on hold and knuckle down. People are struggling to pay their bills now. They're having to take extra jobs now, not fewer. All while our political class are seen to be having a knees up at our expense. Now is the time for leadership. Instead, we've got Boris Johnson jetting off for not one, but 2 holidays. And of course, he has time to swan off to Ukraine and pen a self-congratulatory column for the Daily Mail. His deputy Rob, well, you'll find him playing Laser Quest during the worst cost of living crisis for 50 years. That's, of course, the same Dominic Raab who sunned himself in Crete just as things were kicking off in Afghanistan. I can just imagine my future children in school learning about the year of discontent that was 2022. Their teachers will tell them that just at the time Britain was faced with soaring inflation, the biggest energy squeeze since the 70s, knife and gun crime chaos, our government was nowhere to be found. And we're at a loss for an alternative, aren't we? As the unions threaten maximum disruption this autumn, do you think Keir Starmer and his Labour front bench would stand up to the likes of Mick Lynch? Or would we see our country grind to a halt? Would they tackle the enormous waste in the NHS, reduce the crippling tax burden, or, God forbid, get to grips with what's going on in the Channel? I sincerely doubt it. Then, up in Scotland, we've got Nicola Sturgeon. She continues her obsession with breaking up the union, while ordinary Scots complain that their streets look like a third world country as seagulls feast on a gourmet breakfast of rats due to the bins piling high. Now, I don't mean to sound too miserable. We'll get through this, of course we will. We've got through much worse as a country. Boris Johnson says he's convinced Britain's bounce back will be golden. I hope he's right. I hope our new leader has the strength of character to turn things around. But that will be little comfort to those who are struggling now, who fear for the future now. Liz Truss may say the jury's out on Macron. I'd say the jury's out on our entire political class. Now, I like to focus on the positives in life, usually, but let's face it, we've got a lot to be worried about. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, energy prices are skyrocketing, criminality, it seems, is rampant. It's not looking great, to be honest. So, I'm asking you this afternoon, how do we fix broken Britain? It's rather a big question, but I'm sure my next 2 guests are up for the challenge. Joining me now to discuss this is behavioural psychologist Joe Hemmings, and we've got former Sun editor Kelvin McKenzie. Now, Kelvin, we've got a lot of crises going on at the moment. To you, what's the biggest problem that we're facing in this country?
Well, the biggest problem, I think, will be electing Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak, to be honest, because I think that'll be a disaster. I think the idea that we give away tax cuts or VAT cuts when we face a much bigger issue, which will be which is the energy, that money simply becomes another debt. You know, just look at the price of sterling. I know your viewers may not think that's important, but it is always a reflection of the strength of an economy. And we are right down, I think, at 118 or something, and the running average of sterling is $1 is 140. To the pound, dollar against the pound. So these are very technical issues, but they do reflect the state of the country. We get the economy right, everything else is right. Now look, it's not our fault that we have supported Ukraine, right? Ukraine represents democracy, and the price of democracy is expensive gas. We simply have to put up with that. We say to the skint, we give you your money, right? The idea of giving it to the middle classes or to the 45,000 a yearers, which is the point the Chancellor was making, right? We can't do that. We haven't got the money to do that, and nor is it right. You have to deal with the substantive issue is that the gas is in short supply, prices go up, and therefore we are all in pain. Now,
but hang on, Kelvin. Kelvin, you're the former editor of The Sun. Your readers back then want more money. People want more money in their pockets.
There were millions tens of thousands right now.
There were millions. There were millions of readers of The Sun when you were editor. But anyway, Anyway, your readers of The Sun, they want more money in their pockets. Is that not the way to get economic growth?
They're not going to get it. Forget it. They are not going to get it. They are not going to be funded in the way that is going to make gas plentiful. They have to reduce it. Yes, I know it's painful. They just don't have to get on with it. The price of it in the Ukraine, when people stood up to the very people who were driving our gas prices higher, what was it? It was missiles through their front door, killing people. The 13, 14, 16,000 have been fighting for this. It is part of our fight. Democracy is our fight. This is the price that's paid. And all you've got is a load of bloody socialists marking down the street saying, we're not going to run your railways. We're not going to run your post offices. That's the kind of people we have generated in our country. It is a painful moment for us all. We have to put up with it.
OK, well, Kelvin, that's strong stuff. It doesn't look great for the UK if you listen to Kelvin. Now, Joe, we're going to be talking about crime with you. Now, you've been looking at what's been going on in Liverpool in particular and around our country. It seems that gangs are mobilising and it seems that crime is only going up. What do you think's behind this? You've been looking at the psychology of how these gangs operate.
Well, the psychology of how gangs operate really is that sense of identity, belonging, self-esteem, respect, collaboration, community, and perhaps things they haven't otherwise had. So it becomes very attractive to join a gang. And what's going on at the higher level of organised crime is money, actually. There are people out there saying, listen, we can turn you from a gang, we can actually, make you money. And it's almost like gangs are a gateway to that sort of organised crime. And now that we're in a position where it's not just that people want money, people desperately need money because the fear of people right now and the rising prices is huge. So I think that's very much an element of it. There is a chance there for people to make money and they go from organised gangs where they feel actually a strong level of connection, of respect. This is one of the reasons why Liverpool can't get names out of people. Once you belong in a group like this, you absolutely do not grass, you do not snitch. It's as if you're immune to the terrible things that are going on. You may not do it, but somebody else does it. And you feel that you're almost like a family at this point, perhaps people who didn't have that feeling when they're growing up. So it's very frightening to think this is only going to spiral as our need for money becomes greater.
Now, Kelvin, we're watching this omni-crisis unfold in the country and people are thinking, where on earth is the leadership?
Well, it's not helpful that our Prime Minister got the bullet. To be honest, I wasn't in favour of the Prime Minister getting the bullet under any circumstances, but it's certainly a shocking piece of timing that he's gone and we haven't got somebody to take their place. The only good news about this is that whenever the new Prime Minister takes over, they've still got enough time to deal with the energy pricing aspect before your pricing actually goes up, which is sometime I think in early October. So, look, it's not good. It's not a good look. The Tories are going to be absolutely slaughtered at the next election in a manner which I have never seen. I live in a very wealthy area. I'm pleased to say, by the way. So if anybody wants to tweet in, I'm very sorry. I'm not apologising for living in a wealthy area. In the last May elections, 38% voted Lib Dem against 35% Tories. Round here, everybody has been a Tory for 1,000 years. By the way, Dominic Raab, boom, he'll be gone. And actually, it's going to be a close-run thing if Boris does decide to stay, that boom, he won't be gone. I can see it's being absolutely slaughtered. And my feeling is that Liz Truss actually will make that slaughter even worse. So it was a very unfortunate piece of timing. The Conservative Party look dreadful. The Conservative leadership look dreadful at this moment. You won't find anybody, even among all my friends, who I'm pleased to say are all Conservatives, by the way. I refuse to talk to socialists. We have nothing in common. That includes my eldest daughter. I'm only joking, Kirsten. No, I'm not. Hold on a second. Anyway, it's very tough. It's very tough to be a Conservative right now, I can tell you.
Yes, I think a lot of people are deeply unimpressed and also a little bit ashamed for the government that they've elected. It's sort of, you have to pinch your nose when we put the cross in that box, I imagine. Joe, I don't have any idea what your politics are, but what do you think the psychology is? How do you think the impact of having what seems to be a vacuum at the top of government is for people who are facing this crisis coming?
I mean, it's extraordinary, and it may be summed up a bit by an American client I had the other day. I mean, they've got enough troubles of their own in America. But she said to me, can you just explain to me what's going on in the UK? So you have a prime minister who's still in power, except he's never there and he's on holiday. And then you've got two other people who want to be prime minister, who are on the telly all the time saying what they will do. So we still don't know what will happen. And there's only a couple of 100,000 at most of people voting for them. I thought, when you put it like that, it's absolutely ridiculous that all this time has been spent on hustings and whatever over the last couple of months. We had Boris today popping up and saying, yes, it's going to be eye-watering for you people in terms of cost of living. But don't worry, they're there. It'll be all right. But how is it going to be all right? I mean, we've got two different would-be PMs with different views, which are changing all the time. So I think the vacuum words you used at the beginning is exactly where we are. We're in a vortex of no government. When they say the word government, you think, who are they? Who are the government?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've answered the question how to fix broken Britain, but we've certainly described set out some of the problems we face. Thank you very much for joining me. That was, of course, behavioural psychologist Joe Hemmings and former Sun editor Kelvin McKenzie, who doesn't hold his punches, that's for sure. I mean, looking at this, Charlie, NHS waiting lists, energy prices spiralling, illegal immigration through the roof. What's going wrong?
Plenty of things going wrong, as we've just discussed, 20 minutes of misery so far. But thankfully, there are some ready-made solutions.
Yes.
There are opportunities, very easy opportunities to turn this all around. On the litany of crises facing us, I think every single one has an opportunity for the next Prime Minister to secure some easy wins. Everyone's feeling a bit poorer at the moment. We could put rocket boosters under productivity by liberalising planning reform, adding 10 to 20% to our GDP within a couple of years. It would be extraordinary, making it easier for people to move to where they want to work. That would do enormous things for the cash flows in this country. It would also add to our opportunities to produce more of our own energy. As we've seen in recent months, we've had plenty of MPs from both sides of the House complaining about developments of solar farms and nuclear reactors in their local areas. Maria Coalfield, the Tory MP, a couple of days ago, complaining that money had gone towards a swimming pool rather than a solar farm in her area in the middle of this energy crisis. We could do away with all the limitations there, stop local democracy blocking urgent developments that we need. Small modular nuclear reactors could do an enormous amount in a very short term to dealing with some of the energy shortages that we're having and producing our own renewable British energy. In terms of climate...
this is a manifesto,
well,
Charlie.
I'm ready. There are so many things we can do. I'm so frustrated watching our political class.
Do you know what? Now, I don't want to bash the government too much just because I fear the alternative. And I do also think that it seems to me that when the government does want to get a big policy through, there is so much backlash towards absolutely anything that they wish to do, whether it's from NIMBYs not wanting energy resources in their backyard, energy production, or whether it's planning for housing and so on. It seems that in this country, it's so hard to get anything done. And I just hope that the next Prime Minister, whoever that may be, it looks like it will be Liz Truss, of course, has the nerve, has the bottle to sort this all out. Anyway, we must go to the weather soon. You're with GB News on TV, radio and online. That was Charlie Peters, of course. Today in Solve the Palaver with me, Emily Carver, I'm asking first, is Britain broken? And if so, how can we fix it? I'd love to know your thoughts. As always, tweet me at GB News or email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now let's go to the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many. A few showers around, mainly in the north. Let's home in on that detail for you. So a dry end to the day across southwest England with some bright or sunny spells ahead of dusk. Remaining a little breezy along the south coast, temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius. And a bright evening too across southeast London. Some hazy spells of sunshine, dry for all, an easterly breeze, temperatures the same, about 20. Continuing with the dry theme this evening for South Wales. Wales now. Plenty of bright or sunny spells ahead of nightfall. Temperatures around 21. And a fine and dry end of the day across the Midlands. Plenty of hazy sunshine ahead of sunset, we're told. Light winds making it feel rather pleasant. Temperatures sat at around 21 as well. A rather cloudy end to the day for the northeast of England, although there will be some glimmers of sunshine. Feeling fairly pleasant despite that cloud. Temperatures around 20 and the wind's quite light. A bright end to the day for southern Scotland as dusk approaches. Light winds and dry weather, feeling pleasant. Temperatures around 17 to 19. On the cloudy side, if we head over to Northern Ireland for this evening, and we're told scattered showers across the country. Some of those on the heavy side. Temperatures about 17. So lots of places across the UK remaining dry overnight tonight. Some clear spells, though a few showers for some in the north. And that's how the weather's shaping up.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, all is not well north of the border. Public Health Scotland has warned of a risk to public health as bin strikes continue across the country. They say people could be at risk from the build-up of food, animal and human waste, like nappies. The warning came as another day of talks to resolve the dispute ended and the piles of waste continue to get bigger. Joining me to discuss this is the Conservative MSP for Mid-Scotland and Fife, Murdo Fraser. Hi, Murdo.
Hi, Emily. Good afternoon.
Now, is it fair to say the SNP are to blame for this?
Yeah, the SNP are trying to pass the buck here to local councils in Scotland, who are effectively the employer of council workers. But of course, councils in Scotland derive their money from the Scottish Government's budget. And the Scottish Government has seen an increase in the budget it gets from Westminster. It's up 10% compared to last year. It's the largest it has ever been. But at the same time, they've delivered over the piece a real terms cut in council funding of nearly 5%. And that means that councils are cash strapped. They can't meet the not unreasonable demands from their workers. And the consequence of that we see right across Scotland this week past, with rubbish piling up in the streets. It's been particularly bad in Edinburgh. Now, this is the time of year when we have the Edinburgh Festival, which is Scotland's showcase to the world. So people come from all over the world in the hundreds of thousands to the Edinburgh Festival for a arts festival of 3 weeks and more, and we're seeing these scenes of rubbish piled up in the streets. It's a terrible advertisement to the world of Scotland, and is a direct consequence of decisions being taken by the SNP government. And the irony here, Emily, and the trade unions are making this point, is that the pay offer on the table from the Conservative government in Westminster to local government workers in England is actually more generous to the lowest paid, double what's on offer from the SNP in Scotland. So let's not try and say that this is an example of a bad Conservative government and letting people down and the SNP doing so well. It's quite the opposite. The unions are arguing that if only the SNP followed what the Conservative government is doing, we might be able to find a solution.
And is that because Scotland has even less money to spend because of wastage within the system? Are councils in England a little bit, well, have they got a bit more money to spend?
Well, the reality is, and we saw this from the Scottish Government's own figures that were published just last week, the Scottish Government has around £2,000 more to spend per head of population than the UK average, and even higher than England. So the Scottish Government's got much more money to spend through the Barnett formula. So you might legitimately ask, where is all the money going? Where is it being wasted? And we see that it's being wasted, for example, on half-built ferries that are not delivering for the people in Scotland's islands. We see money being wasted in the failed nationalisation of Prestwick Airport and BiFab in Fife. We see money being wasted on the SNP's pet projects, opening a string of international offices across the world when they could easily share UK embassies and trade offices that already exist. So the SNP are wasting money to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds, and we now see the consequences of that.
I mean, it really is shocking. I mean, if I was walking the streets of London and bins were piled up high and, people were saying it looks like a third world country and that the seagulls are feasting on dead rats, that's what I was reading in the papers today about what ordinary people living in Edinburgh were saying about what they could see around them. I mean, it's a humiliation, no less. I would hate to have tourists coming from far and wide, and that's what they're met with when they come to such a hub of the UK. But I mean, Sturgeon, is the wind going out of her wings, as it were, in terms of the independence? It seems for so long she's been banging on and on and on about having this independence vote next year. But the polling that I've seen shows that the Scots don't want another referendum, at least for now.
Yes, you're right, Emily. The latest poll, I think it came out last week, showed that only 29% of people in Scotland want another referendum held next year, which is the timescale Nicola Sturgeon prefers. And all the recent polls show that most people in Scotland do not support independence. So it's really difficult to see where this is going. But the frustration for many people in Scotland is we have a First Minister who is fixated on the independence question. And in the meantime, the things that really matter to people, cost of living, cleaning up the streets, improving education, sorting out issues with the NHS. You've been discussing this on your programme for the last 25 minutes, but these are happening right across the United Kingdom. And here in Scotland, where we have an SNP government, they are focused and fixated on the independence question instead of getting on with the day job of trying to tackle these really serious issues that really matter to people.
Yes, I think the irony is that if Nicola Sturgeon got her wish, she'd suddenly become accountable and not be able to blame everything on Westminster. Anyway, thank you very much, Murdo, for joining us. That was Murdo Fraser, MSP Conservative for Mid Scotland and Fife. Now, I must read out what the Scottish Government has to say. A spokesperson has said, after constructive discussions over recent days, we are aware that COSLA held a meeting of local authority leaders to discuss a potential proposition. It would not be appropriate for the Scottish Government to comment further beyond encouraging both sides to continue to seek a fair resolution of this dispute. Well then, Charlie, what do you make of that? The bins are piling high in Scotland.
Well, I spent 4 lovely years in Edinburgh. I went to university.
Oh, did
there.
you?
Yes, and it was a beautiful place to live. Probably, I think Edinburgh is probably the most beautiful city in Northern Europe. And I had a safe, fairly prosperous, walkable community it's pretty much, if you had to design the perfect place to live, it would be there. But
It's a little bit hilly, but it's absolutely stunningly beautiful.
It's healthy to walk uphill in the start of the day. But unfortunately, I think in the years since I've left, I'm not rushing to go back, because the political stagnation that I observed when I lived there has only gotten worse in extreme ways. And I think very few people can trust the prospect of moving up north into North Britain and enduring higher tax and worse public services.
What I don't understand is how Nicola Sturgeon manages to get away with her often quite xenophobic rhetoric, at least when it comes to the English, and the fact that she's mobilised so many of these thuggish-type people who support the SNP, her most loyal supporters, you know, shouting whatever they do at the English and at the Tories up in Scotland. I mean, it's pretty hideous what's going on, and she doesn't realise just how much division she's creating, or perhaps that's, of course, her aim if she wants to get Scotland out of the United Kingdom. Anyway, there's plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next, we'll be looking at the legacy of our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. We've looked at Nicola Sturgeon. It's time to get stuck into Boris. This week, he's asked the British public to endure higher energy bills as Ukrainians are paying in blood. Now, well, that irked me a little bit. I'm not quite sure why. Anyway, the leader of Reform UK will join me in the studio next. But first, it's time for the news with the lovely Polly Middlehurst.
Emily, thank you. The top story today, police investigating the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool have warned anyone withholding information is protecting killers. The 9-year-old was shot by a gunman who chased his way into her home in Liverpool on Monday. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of that murder have been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are now urging the public to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
Police appeal in Merseyside. Well, the Prime Minister says a huge package of financial support will be delivered to help struggling households through the energy crisis. Writing in the Daily Mail, Boris Johnson acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering, as he put it, over the next few months, and it's going to be tough. He said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. More than 25,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted just yesterday. The Ministry of Defence saying they were on board 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey to the UK from France. And millions of people are expected to attend the Notting Hill Carnival in West London, which is back after a 2-year break because of the pandemic. Europe's biggest street festival celebrates a fusion of Caribbean, African and European cultures. And today, Sunday, Family Day, featuring a children's parade and music. The carnival ending tomorrow with adults putting on a show. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. And don't go anywhere. Emily's back in just a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, Boris Johnson has had a turbulent time as Prime Minister, but he is often praised for his response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. However, has his legacy on Ukraine been tainted by his claims this week that Brits should endure higher energy bills as the price of freedom in Europe because Ukrainians are paying in blood? That's what he said. But what legacy will Boris leave behind when a new Prime Minister is elected? To discuss this, I'm delighted to be joined by the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. He's here in the studio with me. Now, Richard, do you think Boris Johnson was right to say that we're paying the price, high energy bills, while the Ukrainians are paying in blood?
Good afternoon, Emily. Look, there's no question the Ukrainians are paying in blood, and we are paying higher energy prices. What the Prime Minister has cleverly and deliberately done is try to link the two. The reality is that he's trying to cover up for the fact that the Tories have been in charge for the last 12 years and they have left us woefully short of our own domestic energy. And he seems to forget, for 25 years between 1980 and 2005, we were completely energy independent, self-reliant, we exported energy. And if we had been like that today, we wouldn't have been as dramatically exposed. So I put out a solution this week in a press conference. We've got a supply crisis, we've got a price crisis. We're in a global energy war, Emily. It's really serious. It's the gravest energy crisis since the Second World War, and it could last for years. People naively think that Putin is going to reopen the taps at some point. People think that he'll do that, for example, when the war comes to an end. He's not going to. He's enjoying the pain and the suffering that Western Europe is going through. Why would he open the taps? Why would he release us from that suffering? He doesn't actually really need our money anymore.
No, and he's turning very much east, isn't he, in terms of where he's getting his money from. And Charlie, we've known for a long time that Europe has been reliant on Russia for gas, has been too reliant on regimes that don't have our best interests at heart, you could say. Is Boris Johnson to blame for our lack of security of supply, our lack of affordability of supply?
It's a long-term and long-suffering British crisis. You may have seen recently a video that resurfaced of Nick Clegg in 2010 opposing the development of a nuclear reactor because he warned that it wouldn't come on power until 2022. Well, here we are 12 years later, desperately in the need for that kind of nuclear power. And the short-termist thinking that I think our politics suffers from has caused so many scenarios now where we've missed out on the opportunity to redevelop that energy supply and that security that we once took for granted.
It's incredible. I mean, the Lib Dems, Ed Davey, there's a video of him proudly saying that he stopped the fracking industry.
Yes.
If we had been fracking as the Tories promised in their 2017 manifesto, we would be in a dramatically different place.
Yeah.
Guess what? In the United States, they use shale gas, they frack. Have they got a domestic energy crisis?
So, Richard, if Reform UK were in government, what would they do? Scrap net zero, presumably?
I would certainly... Net zero is net stupid because it's going to impoverish us all. It's going to send our money and jobs...
But could we really do that, though, and retain our status as, a global leader?
We could lead the way. Look, we all want to do our bit for the environment. We all want to reduce emissions for cleaner air. I'm doing my bit. The problem is net zero is the wrong bit at the wrong price. But the urgent crisis
Richard, what are you doing? What are you doing to do your bit?
I've got an electric car. I'm putting solar panels on my industrial buildings to reduce the energy tariffs that my occupiers are having to pay. I'm more than doing my bit.
But you've got the cash to do it, don't you? And is that why you think net zero has been so damaging? Because it is damaging to those at the bottom.
It's harming the least well off, the lowest paid the most. But here's the thing. We're in an urgent crisis. We're in a global energy war. The government's got to take control of the pricing of energy production. That's what the government does in wartime. You take control of the pricing. You've got to say to all the UK territory energy generators and producers, you will sell to UK retail suppliers at the average price you got in 2021. That protects consumers, it protects the vulnerable, it
How
protects
can they
businesses.
do that, though?
You pass a law like we passed the Coronavirus Act. You're the government, you're in charge, you can do that. That's what governments do in wartime. You control the pricing of production. And that's, if you do that, all of a sudden, and you say to the energy producers, after all, they weren't whinging in 2021, they weren't making any profits, they were doing very nicely, thank you. You say to them, look, you've got to do this as part of a national emergency. If you don't do it, or if you reduce your supply, you'll be national.
Well, hang on, isn't the problem that we've had a lack of investment? Surely, when we have a supply crisis, we wouldn't want to be making it more and more difficult for these companies to make some money.
You scrap the windfall tax that all these mainstream parties want to impose, which is completely ridiculous. So you've got to increase the supply, which means you need a national planning regime with local compensation for those who live near energy plants, shale gas wells, etc., etc.
Now, Charlie, who's got the right idea, Sunak or Liz Truss when it comes to energy?
Well, I think both of the propositions have been pretty meek so far. Liz Truss saying that she'll cut the green levy just to put more cash in our pockets. That's not really going to affect the supply crisis that we're having. And she did promise earlier this week to, quote, bung some more money into the system, while also, I think, proposing to build a more sustainable platform. But that's very long term. I mean, Boris Johnson is saying that we're paying in price and the Ukrainians are paying in blood. That's not strictly true. I think this winter, more people die from the cold than the heat, despite global warming concerns. Britons are going to pay with their blood as well. Thousands of Britons will die. And I think it's very important that we get a grip on this immediately. And this competition that's going on for the next Prime Minister stretching on far too long when we need solutions to this yesterday.
Do you know what's frustrating is that, of course, part of the reason we're in this mess is because of lockdown policies around the world, not just in the UK. Massive supply shock, more demand suddenly when everyone's going back to work and things are getting moving, supply chains, etc., etc. Surely we need that kind of wartime effort now to get supply. Domestic supply. Let's get fracking, North Sea.
Exactly, we absolutely do. But it's going to take between 3 and 7 years to bring on this supply. So what you've got to have a two-pronged strategy. You've got to have an urgent, robust way to deal with that supply, increase the supply, encourage the investment. But very short term, you've got to deal with the price crisis. Because otherwise, as I say, elderly will die early of cold and hunger, consumers will suffer, businesses will suffer, jobs will go, and inflation will go even higher. My solution dramatically will reduce inflation, which will then reduce the pressure to raise interest rates, to control inflation. It's a win-win-win.
Well, there you go. It's a win-win-win. Charlie, do you agree?
I support both of those prongs, but I'd like to add a third.
Oh, go on then.
This war is moving into an attritional purgatory. There's no end in sight in the near, short or long term. I think there's going to be stagnation and kind of artillery-based conflict for months and possibly even years to come. This could stretch into 18 months and longer. Is Europe and Britain willing to take a 2-year-long price hit to deal with this problem? I don't think so. And I think the borrowing to pay for changing the price by the hand of government won't last that long, won't stretch that long. And I think, in time, it'll be important for people in Europe and Britain to come to the table with Putin and say, we'll continue to support the Ukrainians militarily, but actually we do need your energy while we build up our own supply. I think there is a good case to say, but to protect thousands of British lives and thousands of Europeans who will perish in the cold, I'm afraid that we have to accept the strategic failure and pay for it.
You're going to prostrate yourself in front of Putin, and he's going to say no. Then where do you go?
OK, well, then we have to go back to the pain.
You're back to my solution.
Give an inch, he takes a mile, presumably, is also there.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've solved the palaver with Emily Carver, which is me, of course, at least in terms of the energy crisis. Thank you very much for joining us, Richard. Now, it's not just people and businesses who are bearing the brunt of our cost of living crisis, of course. Our little furry friends are having a pretty tough time of it too. The RSPCA has reported a 24% increase in pets being dumped this year. Oh, it's very sad. With RSPCA shelters said to be drowning in animals due to increasing numbers of pet owners being forced to decide whether to feed their pets or themselves during the cost of living crisis. I'm sure there are also just some horrible owners who can't be bothered. But anyway, I'm sure the cost of living crisis has a lot to do with it. Anyway, the animal welfare charity has revealed the Cancel Out Cruelty campaign this summer to raise awareness of this pressing issue. Joining me now to discuss this is Dr. Sam Gaines, the head of the companion team at the RSPCA. Now, I was reading about this in the news this week, and it sounds horrific. People are essentially dumping their animals in record numbers.
Hi, Emily. Yes, unfortunately, that is the case. I think it's fair to say that on any typical year, we will see a lot of calls coming into our cruelty line. For example, last year we had 1 million calls that came through. But what we typically see once we come up to the summer holidays is an increase in that. So we'd normally see around 90,000 calls coming through. We expect we're going to get about 134,000 calls this summer, which ends up being around 3 a minute that we get. So it really is a dire situation. And unfortunately, those calls that we will get will cover a range of different issues, animals being killed, beaten and mutilated. So it's a really, really awful situation, hence why we're putting out our campaign to cancel out cruelty so that people become more aware of this.
And from your experience, how many of these pets that are now being dumped were lockdown purchases?
It's really difficult to actually say, which pets are being abandoned because of the lockdown situation and the pandemic. We don't really have the data that bears that out. I think what we can say is that for all of the rescue organisations at the beginning of the pandemic, we were hugely, hugely concerned about the number of people that found themselves at home with their children, a lot more time than what they'd normally have on their hands, and then went out and either bought or adopted pets. And I think, sadly, we are seeing now people with the return to work in some cases giving up those pets, but obviously it's being compounded by the cost of living crisis as well. And there are people genuinely really, really struggling. We did a survey earlier this year and we found out that nearly 20% of people were already starting to be worried about how they were going to feed their pets through this crisis. And, the worst may yet to become. So I think it's incredibly difficult for people. They're making very hard choices around who they feed, including family members, which are their pets. A lot of people, thankfully, do have a really good relationship with their pet and they're very, very important to their family.
And have you seen abuse of pets go up since the pandemic? Because, of course, we've read so much about how problem drinking has got worse, drug abuse, add to that financial concerns, which is often a lead cause of domestic abuse. Has all of that added to the situation where people are taking it out on their pets at home?
We have seen an increase in calls, and I think that, again, it's always really, really difficult pulling apart all of the different factors and what actually leads to that increase in cruel behaviour. I think, typically over summer we do tend to see an increase in the number of complaints that we get coming through to our cruelty line. And obviously we did see that partly during the lockdown as well, because obviously people were at home a lot more often. But it's often very, very difficult to attribute cause and effect. But I think, what we are really concerned about this year is this big increase that we're starting to see already. And just for an example, we've had more than 9% increase in people actually contacting our emergency hotline. So again, that can well be people that are concerned about their own pets and concerned about other people's pets as well.
And is that the best thing to do then, to call the helpline if you're worried, you're a pet owner, you've got a little dog and you're worried that you can't actually afford its upkeep? Should they give you a bell first or what?
So what we're actually saying to people is that there are a number of different options that can be explored if people are struggling with their pet. So, for example, one of the things that people might well be able to do is think about the food that they're feeding them, and is it possible to transition them slowly onto a cheaper food? But for people that really, really are struggling, what they do need to remember is that rescue organisations are there to help them. So if they are really worried about their pet, please do reach out and help. No one is going to judge them. People shouldn't feel ashamed or guilty that they're asking for help. These are incredibly difficult, unprecedented times, and we are here to help people.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sam. That was, I hope that you can help all these animals, and I hope people are able to keep their pets despite the rising cost. It sounds a pretty difficult situation for many pet owners. I know how expensive it is to take a dog to the vet as well as feed it. So that was Dr. Sam Gaines, the head of the companion team at the RSPCA. Now, moving on. Exeter University has placed a trigger warning on Mark Twain's classic novel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The book, released in 1884, tells the story of a river journey by young Huck Finn, a black man escaping slavery, and has been viewed as a prime example of anti-racist literature by many academics for generations. The university has described it as, in quotes, problematic, due to the use of the N-word throughout the novel. But there are plenty of pieces of old literature, aren't there, that are being hit by trigger warnings. So, to debate whether universities should place trigger warnings on books is politics and international relations student Jude Lavos and media studies student Jess Gill. Now, we've seen a lot of this. I think it was the Sunday Times who did a piece where they investigated reading lists and found that all sorts of books were being given these warnings. Jess, is this woke gone mad?
Well, I think a misconception about this is that it's due to sensitivity. I don't think it's due to sensitivity. I think it's about control. I think these leftist weirdos want to control what's on our curriculum. They don't have anything against being racist, because we've seen with BLM, they're for racial division. But with this, they just want this critical race theory, this postmodernist agenda being pushed. It's not about snowflakery or sensitivity. They want to control what's going on.
Now, Jude, do you accept that?
I think there's no problem with putting a trigger warning on a book. We're not banning it. If we were to ban the book, I'd have a massive problem with that. I don't think we should be censoring it at all. But pre-warning people about the contents inside is perfectly fine. We do it with music videos, we do it with TV, we do it with films.
Jude, do you not think that's a bit...
blurbs.
It's a bit infantilizing, is it not? I mean, Jude, if you saw the N-word in a book, it wouldn't make you start saying it out loud, would it? And I'm sure black friends of yours can cope with reading that in a historical, from a historical perspective.
Oh, no, it's not a case of me reading the word and then having some drive to say it. It would be the fact that we want to be, you know, as best informed as we can be when we enjoy media. I want people to get the full fact of what they're about to read, what they're about to consume. And I think a trigger warning that says, you know, this is an anti-racist book, however, it does use some language that we wouldn't use anymore. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. All it does is inform people and give them a better ability to make a choice on whether they want to read it, and gives them the full facts before they do so.
Now, Jess, I mean, it seems to me, and I agree with you, that universities, through their reading lists and other means, do seem to want to indoctrinate children, essentially young people, in one ideological direction. Do you think that's fair to say? Can you actually give me some evidence, some cold, hard evidence that this is happening?
I mean, personally, throughout my school life, we have decolonised the curriculum and all this stuff, which is just removing the context, removing what is needed to be said from this situation. It may just be, you know, having a trigger warning and allowing people, but again, it's very patronising towards the students. And I think the key aspect of this, of these pieces of literature, life isn't nice. And we need to prepare for that. As someone who has PTSD, who needs trigger warnings with certain things, I think it's quite insensitive.
Jude, do you think, just to finish, we've got to finish here because sadly we've got to go to the break, but do you think that the move to decolonise curriculum is essentially just a move to erase white old men?
No, I think we should teach the curriculum in its full details and tell everyone the full facts. I'm afraid that isn't being done. Whether that's left or right, I don't think we should be hiding our history. We should give everyone the full facts of the matter and let them come up with their own view. I completely disagree with this idea that we should erase the history, because I think we will find good bits, we'll find bad bits. That's just the way it is with the country's history. But I'm all for teaching the full facts. I would completely disagree with erasing the history.
Well, there you go. Both of you sound very balanced and mature, so hopefully you'll be able to accept texts, even if they are deemed problematic. Anyway, that was politics and international relations student Jude Lavos and media studies student Jess Gill. Now, you're watching Real Britain with me, Emily Carver. It's time for a quick break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Welcome back. This is Real Britain with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, radio and online. Now this hour, we're going to be discussing whether it's right to give children junk food as a treat. And that's because a lot of people are facing cost of living crisis, and sometimes junk food is the only treat they can give their children. Or is this a bad move anyway? Also on the show, as high streets up and down the UK struggle, are we at risk of becoming boarded up Britain? How can we kick some much needed life back into our high streets? And today we've got the writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters, who joins me this hour too. But first, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Emily, thank you. It's 3 o'clock and I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. Police investigating the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool have warned anyone withholding information is protecting killers. The 9-year-old girl was shot dead by a gunman who chased his intended target into her home in Liverpool on Monday. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of her murder have been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are urging the public to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
In other news today, a huge package of financial support has been promised by the government to help people struggling through their household bills, and particularly the energy crisis. The Prime Minister has written an article in the Daily Mail where he acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering and the next few months are going to be tough. He also said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. Well, the two Tory leadership candidates are yet to reveal exactly how they plan to ease the cost of living crisis. Rishi Sunak's team has criticised reports that Liz Truss plans to cut VAT by 5%, describing it as incredibly regressive. It's understood the Foreign Secretary has discussed a nuclear option with her advisers, which would reportedly save the average household more than £1,300 a year. Mr Sunak's campaign says the move would cost more than £30 billion. Meanwhile, Ms Truss has vowed to bolster Britain's defences if she becomes Prime Minister, saying the era of complacency is over. She wants to push ahead now with renewing Trident, and she wants to strengthen support for intelligence services as part of her plans to protect the UK. Retired British Army officer Major General Tim Cross told GB News, with Russia a renewed threat, Britain needs to reconsider its defence and foreign policy.
Over these last 20 years, we have become complacent. We never really put sufficient resources in terms of military into Iraq or Afghanistan, and we weren't prepared to stay there for the length of time that we had been involved in, for example, the Cold War. So I think we have been complacent, and what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, and indeed elsewhere, I mean, autocracies, dictatorships, China, and so on, has made people realise that we do need to think again about how we're going to engage in not just defence policy, but foreign policy and other aspects of our external relationships as well.
More than 25,000 migrants have now crossed the English Channel so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted yesterday alone. The Ministry of Defence is saying they were on 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey from France. A father who was jailed for torturing his son has had his release from prison blocked. Little Tony Hudgell was so badly abused by his parents, he needed to have both his legs amputated. Anthony Smith was due to be released next month, but his case was referred to the parole board and, under new powers to protect the public from dangerous offenders, was turned down. Tony's adoptive mother has welcomed the intervention. Victims of the Grenfell Tower disaster are being remembered at the Notting Hill Carnival today. Members of the Emancipated Run crew wore green T-shirts as the event returned to the streets of London for the first time since 2019. Paying tribute to the 72 people who lost their lives in the fire, survivor Zoe Dainton told the crowd there's been little progress since the Grenfell inquiry.
5 years, still no justice, still no charges, not much change. And despite what happened at Grenfell, and despite endless evidence that came out of the inquiry, those responsible, including the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, seem to be suffering from amnesia and are acting like it's business as usual.
The Brexit minister is planning to sell off £1.5 billion worth of government offices in central London. Jacob Rees-Mogg told the Sunday Telegraph taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for buildings that are underutilised, with many civil servants still working from home. He's due to publish a property strategy that will see staff operating in fewer buildings as part of a network of government hubs. That's it. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Emily.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Emily Carver. Now here's what's coming up on the show this hour. New research shows that parents are using junk food as a treat. This is because they can't afford to go on holidays or days out. This feels like yet another impact of the cost of living crisis. I'll be asking, is it right to feed your children junk food in just one moment? Also, we'll be talking to the sociologist Frank Furedi, who's written an article saying that we need more discipline in schools. Has discipline become a bit of a dirty word, or is it vital in education? Is it vital for creativity even? And we'll discuss Britain's high street. Are we slowly becoming boarded up Britain? It seems to me that high streets up and down the country are victims of vacant shops and boarded up windows. We'll look at how we can kick some life back into our high street. And we'll also be solving the palaver with me, Emily Carver. Your views are much more important than mine, and I want to know your thoughts today. Is Britain broken? Or are you of a generation where you think, you know what, we've been through worse, let's pull up our socks, put a jumper on and get on with it? Or maybe you are one of those who feel badly let down by our government and political class. Tweet me at GBNews. Let me know what you think. You can email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. And of course, you can watch us online too on YouTube, where you can catch up. And don't forget Facebook, where you'll find lots of brilliant content on the GB News page. Thanks for tuning in. Right, now junk food for children. New research has found that more and more parents are buying junk food for their children to compensate for being unable to afford to take them on holiday or for days out. So parents essentially end up taking their children to the local chip shop, the local kebab shop, the burger chain as a treat. But is this right? Is it right to give junk food to kids as a treat when Britain is already among the most obese countries in Europe, indeed the world, I think. Anyway, joining me now to discuss this is Steve Miller, who is a weight loss hypnotherapist and chair of the National Obesity Forum. Tam Fryer, we've also got Charlie Peters with us here today as well. So, Steve, come on, there's lots of parents out there who are struggling with the cost of living. They can't afford to take their kids on holiday or, put them into some kind of dancing camp or learn to play the violin. Can't they just give them a burger?
Well, the answer to that is yes, of course. We can't deny children a treat. But I think what we need to do is educate the nation that we can't just give our kids treat. So what I would say to all parents, as I do, is that 80% of the time we really should be giving the kids healthy food and teaching them, of course, how to cook it. And then 20% of the time giving them a treat. So I'm not the sort of guy that would say, let's deny the kids a chocolate bar and a trip down the chippy. I mean, we all love a chippy sandwich, for example. But it's about being realistic and having practical common sense, because we do have an obesity problem in this country. We are getting fatter.
We are getting fatter. That's definitely true. Tam, do you think that actually one of the problems is that we view junk food, we view food as a bit of a treat? Can that actually be one of the reasons why people get, binge eating disorders or gain weight or have a problematic relationship with food, that they were given it as a treat and it feels like something, that they can then have when they grow older?
Yeah, it is terrible. Food should never be regarded as a treat. If you can find something which the child really wants, that should be the objective. But to give the child more food is not a good idea. Whether, in fact, it's healthy or not is neither here nor there. Treats are non-food items.
Wow, there you go. Food can't be
I think that's ridiculous.
Treat.
I think that's... If you want me to come on as an opposing view on that, I think that's just ridiculous. That is, we've got to change our language now for food, and we can't call things treats. Listen, a treat is a treat, and let's not treat the public as though they're thick. People know what a treat is. If I have a treat this afternoon with my gin and tonic, for example, and a Big Mac or whatever I have, that to me is a treat. And kids know, they're not stupid. People can tell the difference between, a treat and a non-treat. And I think using, going down the route now of saying you can't call food a treat is just bonkers.
Charlie, do you think that the public health lobby, our politicians, people who campaign against obesity like Steve and Tam here, do you think they're a little bit nanny state gone mad?
Well, I'll happily disagree with both guests, actually. I think the statement and the assertion that Britain is getting fatter, I think, is built on sand. Indeed, that is the language used by Professor Tim Cole, who is in charge of the obesity statistics in Britain. He advised the government on dealing with this. He said that the methodology was built on sand, and I certainly agree with him. BMI as a measure is a hopeless tool, and we've been relying on it for years to discuss obesity, both for adults and children. I think childhood obesity is broadly a myth in Britain. People wax lyrical with fear and trepidation about how fat our children are becoming. I don't think that's
Charlie,
true.
no.
I just don't think it's true. I don't think there's significant methodology to support it.
No, Charlie, I think that, I'm against too much intervention simply because sometimes I just don't think it works. The evidence isn't there to support ad bans and things like that. But I think it's pretty true when you go through particularly deprived areas of the country, but also in well-to-do areas, children are getting fatter.
No,
I don't think we can deny that. We see it with our own eyes. But I think, Pam, isn't this a problem about lack of exercise? Children aren't moving. That's why during lockdown they put on the pounds.
Well, exercise has something to do with it, but it's not the main reason. I thought I was only going to disagree with Mr. Miller, but I now find I have two adversaries. Exercise is always a good thing, of course, but you're not going to work off your bad diet with exercise. What you've got to do is to limit the amount of calories and food that you're consuming, and that will get your weight down. Put the two together and you've got a recipe for success. But it's got to be less than we are eating at the moment. At the moment, we're eating 20% more than we should be doing, and certainly in the deprived areas, which you've just introduced, obesity rates are double that in the least deprived areas. And that's basically as a result of fast food.
Steve, do you think perhaps this report, this research that's been done, is giving parents excuses? Because, my mum told me that her mother, didn't have any money at all, and they didn't eat lots of junk food.
Listen. I'm a former council house kid. I didn't have the silver spoon in my mouth. And my belief is that it is still, even with the cost of living crisis, and yes, I'm all for supporting people, make that clear, but it is still, if you look deeply into the numbers, like I did today, it can be still cheaper to eat healthy compared to eating unhealthy. So, for example, in the report that you're referring to, a bumper bag of crisps was mentioned at £1. Well, I went online today, I can get 4 pairs for 59p. And also I can get where is it here? I can get a large fruit box for 6 people to last a week for £8.49p. You go down the chippy, and this report mentions that they're all going down the chippy. It's about 7 or 8 quid for chips and fish and chips now. So we need to be a little bit more sensible about this. I think what needs to be done is we need to bring it to the forefront where this kind of cheaper, healthy food is available, because we're not very good at that. But, I have to say it's still cheaper to eat well.
Yeah, I think we need to take the emotions sometimes out of this conversation. People always want to make excuses. Charlie, is being fat a choice?
Not all the time. I think there are some genetic predispositions towards people putting on more weight. Some of them people find it easier to put on weight if they have low metabolisms. But I really have to take back your statement earlier that you can see with your own eyes that Britain is getting fatter, that children are becoming more obese. We do not rely on anecdotal evidence to assert whether or not people are becoming less unhealthy. Since the 90s, childhood obesity has been flatlined. It hasn't risen. This country is not enduring the obesity crisis that many assert it is. In fact, while there are still people who are starving and struggling to feed their children, I'll finish. You've had plenty of time to speak. You've had plenty of time to speak. Now, while there are still people in this country who are starving and struggling to feed their children, the emphasis should be on education, on cooking, and doing what we can to make it easier for people to feed them, not punishing them and not patronising them about the food they feed their children.
Pam, just to finish. Sorry, Steve, what did you say?
Charlie's just been saying what we were saying in 1992, something like that. I mean, he's just saying the same old stuff, and he's basically saying that we've got to stop worrying about the nation getting fatter. I mean, the medics out there and the leaders, the gurus, I guess, would completely disagree with him. And I think they'll probably be saying, what are we doing? Are we doing fat shaming now, Charlie? Is that what you're saying? Are we talking about it? Are you saying we're fat shaming people by bringing it to the attention of the nation?
Anyway, I must let Pam have the last word because he's spoken the least, I think. How far would you go Tam. So sorry, not Pam. Tam, how far would you go in terms of trying to get obesity rates down? Do you want to, ban things like adverts? Do you think banning buy one, get one free is a good idea? What do you think?
No, banning things is not a good idea in general. What I would do is to persuade the government to actually get the food industry to make the food that they produce healthier. At the moment, the food industry has got the whip hand. It holds the government in thrall. What is needed is the food industry needs to be told only a certain amount of sugar, only a certain amount of fat, only a certain amount of food. And if you go over that, then you'll get fined. This happened in the sugary drinks industry levy. George Osborne told industry, in 2 years' time, if you don't take the sugar out of fizzy drinks, then we'll fine you. And do you know what happened? The boards of all the drinks companies got together and said, hey, this is stupid. Why are we paying the government money? We'll take the sugar out. And in fact, 35% of sugar is now disappeared from the drinks we drink.
And that's a shame. They were tastier, and now they're significantly worse, and it's not making a difference. Sugar isn't the devil. It's okay to have a Diet Coke. It's okay to have a full fat Coke.
There we go. Steve's agreeing with Charlie.
Take the pack out of our diet.
You're right. Taz on his own. You know what I think? I think we all just need to stop making excuses for each other and actually take personal responsibility for our diets. And that means parents actually, having to put some work into deciding how they can make a healthy meal on the cheap. I mean, apparently not really allowed to say things like that anymore. It always has to be the government's fault or the greedy corporate's fault or, anyone's fault but our own. Anyway, thank you very much for all joining me. That was Steve Miller, a weight loss hypnotherapist, and Tam Fry, of course, here in the studio, chair of the National Obesity Forum, and Charlie Peters, who was giving that libertarian voice in the middle. Anyway, plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Today, of course, in Solve the Palaver, with me, Emily Carver, I'm asking you, is Britain broken? And if so, how would you fix it? Keep your thoughts coming in and we'll go through them before 4 p.m. But first, let's go to the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many. A few showers around, mainly in the north. Let's home in on that detail for you. So a dry end to the day across southwest England with some bright or sunny spells ahead of dusk. Remaining a little breezy along the south coast, temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius. And a bright evening too across southeast London. Some hazy spells of sunshine, dry for all, an easterly breeze, temperatures the same, about 20. Continuing with the dry theme this evening for South Wales now, plenty of bright or sunny spells ahead of nightfall, temperatures around 21, and a fine and dry end of the day across the Midlands. Plenty of hazy sunshine ahead of sunset, we're told. Light winds making it feel rather pleasant. Temperatures sat at around 21 as well. A rather cloudy end to the day for the northeast of England, although there will be some glimmers of sunshine. Feeling fairly pleasant despite that cloud. Temperatures around 20 and the wind's quite light. A bright end to the day for southern Scotland as dusk approaches. Light winds and dry weather, feeling pleasant. Temperatures around 17 to 19. On the cloudy side, if we head over to Northern Ireland for this evening, and we're told scattered showers across the country. Some of those on the heavy side. Temperatures about 17. So lots of places across the UK remaining dry overnight tonight. Some clear spells, though a few showers for some in the north. And that's how the weather's shaping up.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Now, before the break, that was a very heated debate on whether children should be fed junk food as a treat. Anyway, we're going to be moving on to what might be another heated discussion. Who knows? Do children in Britain lack discipline? This is after one school in Kent was dubbed the strictest in the UK, with parents describing the institution as, in quotes, an army camp, with children terrified to even go in the school. Following changes implemented by an education advisor at the Abbey School, Ofsted rated it inadequate. This is despite drafting in the man known as Britain's strictest head teacher, Barry Smith, as an education advisor. I believe that he gave them an inadequate because there was too much discipline. Anyway, this all begs the question, just how strict is too strict? Joining me now to discuss this is Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Kent, Frank Furedi. Now, you know what you're talking about when it comes to this. You've written a fantastic article about how discipline has become a bit of a dirty word.
Yeah, I mean, this is my local school. And although Ofsted has downgraded it, it's also the case that in terms of its academic performance, it's done much, much better than ever before. And it's worth noting that whereas this school was considered to be more or less a sink school when I first moved to Faversham, now it's been steadily raising its standards, both for A-levels and GCSEs. So for me, this is a very successful school. And what they don't like and they don't understand about it is that the academic success of the school, which even Ofsted recognizes, is linked to discipline. Now, one of the things I'm worried about, and I've done a bit of research on this, is that over the last 20 years, discipline has become a dirty word, and very often it's seen as a synonym for punishment. But actually, discipline is very creative. It gives you the foundation whereby children know the rules. They know, sort of the signpost, which direction to go into. They also know how far to go, because if they go too far, then some kind of problem will kick in at that stage in time. But they also know that they can test those rules. And I don't know about you, but when I was a child, I used to always test, sort of the rules. For example, in my school, we were forced to wear these ties all the time. And what we all did was we tied our ties in such a way that was really, really short and looked absurd. And that was a bit silly, but it was our way of engaging with these rules, which we knew were quite important, but at the same time, we kind of kicked up against it. But if you got no rules at all, if discipline disappears, then you got nothing to kick up against. You got nothing to develop in relation to. And that's what I worry about. I think that the adult world, both parents and teachers, are often scared to tell children not to take mobile phones into the classroom. Little things like that.
But I also think it's a case of ideology, isn't it? A lot of teachers simply don't believe fundamentally in the need to restrict children's behaviour. They should be free to do whatever they like because that's the best way to foster their creativity, when in reality it means that they're outside smoking, being disruptive in the classroom, not handing in their homework on time, not wearing the correct uniform. The list goes on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's this weird pedagogy which has been around for some time that argues that if you bring in rules and if you have discipline, that thwarts the personal development, the intellectual, moral development of a child, and somehow it diminishes their creativity because they believe, quite wrongly as it happens, that children are creative when they can act in accordance with their spontaneous desires. Now, we know from experience, as parents and as educators, that if kids are left to themselves, they will do whatever they feel like quite naturally. And their capacity to be creative and to be able to develop strong psychological resources is not going to be helped by this. On the contrary, people's psychological resources and their creativity takes place in an interaction with the guidelines that gives them a sense of focus in terms of where they're going.
But also there's a difficulty, isn't there, Frank, when there's no discipline at home. So teachers are then left to sort of pick up the pieces and give children the boundaries that they simply don't have at home. I mean, there are stories of people I know who are teachers, stories of parents rocking up at parents' evening in no fit state and then making excuses for their children instead of believing the teacher when they say that their child has been disruptive. How much of a problem is that?
I think there's a civil war going on between teachers and parents. So the parents blame the teachers for the discipline problem, and the teachers blame the parents for the lack of discipline. I think they're both at fault, and I think what binds them together is they have both lost the capacity to take adult authority seriously, because adult authority is the foundation for giving a kind of clarity to the whole experience of socialization for young kids. A lot of parents are really scared to kind of hold the line. When you talk to parents, they will tell you, yeah, you're right, Frank, but I'm really worried that my child will stop loving me, or I'm really worried that if I hold the line, I will not be able to enforce it. So what you've got as a result of that is this continuous process whereby instead of giving clarity and guidance, a lot of parents end up almost like behaving like children themselves and making excuses, as you suggest.
Yes, I think that's very true. Thank you very much for joining me to discuss what is a very important issue and affects most of us up and down the country. That was, of course, Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Kent, Frank Furedi. Thank you very much. Now, Charlie, did you have strong discipline?
Well, I mean, I was lucky to go to a beautiful school in Hampshire where strong discipline...
Delightful.
Yeah, it was. It was a delight, in fact. Where strong discipline wasn't really necessary because we had small classrooms and everybody wanted to be there. Everyone had a good vision of what they expected in their education, had a positive outcome of what they wanted in life, and they realised that by cracking on and working hard, you'd get there.
All of them?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, seriously.
There are always little terrors, even at the best schools.
Yeah, that might be true, but generally speaking, I didn't come across many in my classes, at least. I think, well, it was a highly selective school, and so everyone who was there, there was an anticipation that you were going to make the most of this extraordinary opportunity you'd been given, and nobody really wanted to waste that.
They actually appreciated it.
Precisely, and also nobody wanted to be uncool by getting in the way of everybody else's education, because there's nothing that we hated more, than people who were going to prevent us from learning.
Well, that's very interesting because, of course, in a lot of schools, showing that you care about your work is deemed uncool, other than the other way around. But I do feel for teachers who have to discipline children because the children have absolutely no boundaries at home. Perhaps their parents are absent a lot of the time. Perhaps they have no rules at school and perhaps they're allowed to stay up all night doing God knows what. And then they turn up at school having had no sleep, barely washed and clothed. And, end up doing a spliff outside the front of the school. That seems to be what goes on a lot of the time anywhere, near me anyway. The school's near me, that's what you see outside. Anyway, moving on. Next we'll be talking, let me know if you've seen that sort of thing outside your school nearby. I mean, it does go on. Anyway, next we'll be talking about our high streets. Are we edging ever closer to becoming boarded up Britain? What needs to be done to rejuvenate high streets throughout Britain? But before we get into that, it's time for a check on the news headlines with the lovely Polly Middlehurst.
Emily, thank you. The headlines: police investigating the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool have warned that anyone withholding information regarding those responsible are protecting killers. The 9-year-old was shot dead by a gunman on Monday when he was chasing an intended target through her home. 2 men who were arrested on suspicion of murder have been released on bail, with one of them being recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his licence. Merseyside police are pleading with anyone with any information to come forward, saying silence is not an option.
We've got a 9-year-old girl who won't celebrate her 18th birthday. She won't celebrate her wedding. She won't have children of her own. If you've got information and you're withholding it, you're protecting the killers. We need your information.
Meanwhile, in other news, the Prime Minister says a huge package of financial support will be delivered to help struggling households through the energy crisis. Writing in the Daily Mail, Boris Johnson acknowledged bills are going to be eye-watering and the next few months are going to be tough. He also said colossal sums of taxpayers' money is already being used to help people, and his successor will announce more support next month. More than 25,000 migrants have crossed the Channel so far this year. That's after 915 people were intercepted yesterday. The Ministry of Defence saying they were on board 19 small boats. Monday saw the highest daily total on record, with 1,295 people making the treacherous journey to the UK from France. And millions of people are expected to attend the Notting Hill Carnival in West London today, which is back after a 2-year break, which happened because of the pandemic. Europe's biggest street festival celebrates a fusion of Caribbean, African and European cultures. And today is Family Day, featuring a children's parade and, of course, music. It all ends tomorrow with the adults putting on a colourful show in West London. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Don't go anywhere. Emily's back in just a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Right, now let's talk about boarded up Britain and what can be done to turn around the fortune of our high streets. Many of them have been hit by the impact of COVID and lockdowns, of course, and now the ongoing cost of living crisis means customers have less to spend, and online shopping, of course, which many people started using for the first time during the pandemic, are just a few of the reasons high streets are now struggling. So what actually can be done? I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by Kate Nichols, who is, of course, the CEO of Hospitality UK and has been working very hard representing the industry over the past few years, and Alex Schlagman, a founding partner of Save the High Street, who, of course, has been doing the same. Now, Kate, it's what a few years for retail. Particularly for the high street. You know, online sales were up massively during the pandemic because that was one of the only ways you could get many items, really. How is the high street now faring?
Well, high street businesses are still struggling. On the hospitality side, we have seen a large number of casualties during COVID. Those are the ones that have borne the brunt of closures and job losses are our high street pubs, bars, nightclubs and restaurants. We lost 1 in 10 businesses across the UK, but in our town centres and high streets, it was as high as 1 in 5. And those businesses that have survived are now facing a tsunami of ever-escalating costs, as well as that cost of living squeeze. So we are seeing businesses in a really significantly difficult situation, caught between rising costs and a squeeze on consumer income. So we need to have urgent action to be able to make sure that those businesses can come through the latest crisis that they've been dealing with, and that we have investment back into our high streets, which is much needed.
Now, Alex, a lot of our shops and high street retail were supported through lockdown in one way or another, through the various support packages that were on offer, through, I think, relief on certain taxes like business rates. But now we've got to this position where these shops have been helped and kept afloat for a couple of years, and now it seems like they're stuck in what is a storm of rising energy costs and also labour shortages.
Yeah, businesses are being hit by all sides, from all sides at the moment. So in addition to the increasing energy bills, the supply costs are going up. Businesses are effectively spending more money to get products into their shops, whatever they're offering. At the same time, they're personally facing their own personal challenges, as are their team. So they're under pressure to increase the wages. And simultaneous to this, the consumer has less money in their pocket to spend. So they're really being hit from all sides at the moment. And we have to look at a really centralized and coordinated effort now to mitigate the challenges and move towards what can be a positive future over the coming years.
Now, Kate, in some well-to-do areas, the high streets are still quite vibrant. You see cafes, of course, and nice little boutique shops, but that's not the same picture in large swathes of our country. High streets were already looking pretty bleak, you know, a betting shop, a dingy pub, and maybe a charity shop or two is quite normal. Is there a way of boosting our high streets without too much money having to come from government?
Well, we did boost our high streets a lot after the financial crash. The decade following the financial crash in 2010, you saw £10 billion a year invested by hospitality. You saw 2 hospitality businesses opening a day across high streets, not just those affluent ones you're mentioning, but across those more deprived communities, the areas that need levelling up. We've relied heavily upon hospitality to be able to deliver that, and we've delivered that in spades. Pre-COVID, we were the only sector of the economy growing, and we were generating 1 in 6 of net new jobs. That's all come to a grinding halt after the 2 years that the hospitality sector has faced. It doesn't have the ability to be able to make that level and scale of investment. So we do need to make sure that we can tackle the cost of doing business. Alex is absolutely right. These businesses are facing a perfect storm. They can't make those investments. They can't help deliver the change on the high street and in our local communities that we need unless we can get them back to having a breathing space and we can tackle the cost of doing business. If we do that, we will keep a downward pressure on prices, we'll keep a downward pressure on inflation, and we'll make sure that the economic crisis isn't worsened by seeing job losses and business failures across our high streets. But it is going to need some further direct intervention from government to make that happen. The businesses themselves are simply not in a position to do that themselves after the 2 years of COVID that we faced.
And Alex, what are the biggest costs for small businesses on the high street? Of course, rent must be a massive one.
So, yeah, rent and rates are always talked about as major cost items there. And I think there's more that can be done, particularly as we move forward and we look at a new generation of high street startups filling gaps being left by national chains and local brands disappearing from high streets. We need to reduce the friction to helping these businesses get onto the high street. A lot of the initiatives we've been focused on around this have been giving businesses an opportunity to almost try before you buy. Have a rent-free period at the beginning with tons of support to help you launch effectively. Ensure that the economics work for you to be a viable business before you make long-term commitments. So rent and rates clearly are a big part of this. I mean, a lot of the conversation over the last week or period has been around energy price increases. And the reality is, as a business, there are no caps. As much as we talk about the caps increasing for consumers, at the moment, there are no caps for businesses. So it's become increasingly scary, and it's pushed businesses who have already been on the edge to a point of actually having to make very difficult decisions about whether or not they move forward and survive. As we look at cost of goods sold, you know, the actual product that businesses have, it's costing them more to get those products into the store, into the restaurant, into the pub. And those cost increases can't be passed on equally to the consumer because they haven't got enough money in their pocket to spend either. So what we need to do is make sure that every single business is really achieving their own potential. Are they doing everything they can be doing to make the most of the opportunity for sales in front of them, attracting footfall, generating sales? And have they got the support to really look and make the most of looking at all of their costs and reducing costs where possible? So there are things that can be done for the businesses, and there are things that can be done at the grassroots level to attract more people to high streets. But alone, without a significant concerted effort from government over the coming months, there is likely to be a bloodbath and a lot of change on the high street.
Now, Kate, of course, there are some businesses that have been kept afloat that simply just don't have an effective business model. They won't stand the test of time for various reasons. But one area that we've been reporting on quite a lot is our pubs. Pubs are really taking a hit. I mean, I think we probably all saw the stats out this week. I think it was something like 7 in 10 pubs could face closure over the winter months because they're being hit by so many rising costs. Now, the government is putting a lot of cost onto pubs, are they not? Not just beer duty, but other taxes and regulations on that industry. Just how hard is it for pubs to actually make money these days?
It's increasingly difficult. These businesses always operate on a very small net profit margin, but that profit margin is eroded altogether. And in some cases, what would be otherwise viable businesses have become unviable overnight simply due to the energy costs that are going through. We also mentioned business rates. The pub sector, the hospitality sector, it accounts for 5% of GDP, but pays 15% of business rates. And that's simply not sustainable in the current environment. We need to find a measure whereby the bricks and mortar businesses are not subsidising clicks and mortar businesses in the online environment if we want to have a sustainable sector. And for, these are not just pubs, these are not just restaurants, these are not just bed and breakfasts. These are people's livelihoods and jobs. It's the third largest private sector employer that stands behind them. So this will be a large number of job losses, and it's communities that will lose out. When you lose your pub, when you lose your neighbourhood restaurant, you lose the local supply chain that goes alongside it, and you lose the community facility that goes alongside it that keeps many of these communities vibrant and vital. So it's really important that we help these businesses, we give them a breathing space, we cut back on regulatory costs. And a couple of things that the government could do would be to reform business rates, but also to extend the rate relief holidays that we saw during COVID, which have been taken away, and reverse the increase in VAT that our pubs saw from April when their business costs went up and their prices went up to consumers on the back of it.
Thank you very much, Kate. That was Kate Nichols, CEO of Hospitality UK, and Alex Schlagerman, thank you very much for joining me as well, a founding partner of Save. the high street. It seems to me that it's the government, Charlie, that are just making everything more and more expensive. If the government maybe just took a little bit of a step back, maybe deregulated a bit, maybe cut those taxes a little bit, these businesses would have more of a chance of actually, staying afloat.
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, in this discussion now, it's very much in the keeping of the theme of today's show of Broken Britain, boarded up high streets. It's a miserable business. And do you know what? You're right to say that I think in many cases, deregulation and limiting business rates and taxes is the way to help these people. But it really angers me to think that while all these businesses are facing being shut down and boarded up, the Prime Minister in his final month in office is instead choosing to jet around and have holiday. Why couldn't he speak to some of these businesses, do what he can to prepare an emergency package, ask what he can do to present a package to the next Prime Minister and say, here's how you can save some British high streets?
I think he's probably wiped his hands of it all now, hasn't he? He's moving on. He'll make lots of money doing whatever else. Anyway, we're going to move on. Since the COVID sorry, a bit more miserable news anyway. Since the COVID pandemic, regional differences in the proportion of top GCSE grades have become more prominent. That means students in London are achieving much higher grades than those in the North East and Yorkshire. Although Schools Minister Will Quince recognised that regional disparities in GCSE attainment have always existed, he said that there are 55 educational investment areas in the country, as well as grants available to help reduce disparities. Sounds like they're trying to do something about it. Let's see. Joining me now to discuss this is Fiona Spellman, the CEO of Shine Support and Help in Education. Now, you've signed a letter to both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. What have you said in that letter?
So Shine has signed that alongside our partners at the Northern Powerhouse Partnership and Schools North East to really call on the government to take seriously this growing regional divide, which in a sense is evidence of the government going backwards on its pledges around levelling up. It's really, really important that students in the north of England have the same chances as all other students wherever they are in the country, because they have just the same potential. And we believe it's really time for the government to deliver on that.
Said various ministers have. I'm sure Boris Johnson himself has always said we have equal intelligence and capability around the country. All we need is to level up opportunity. Do you think that schools in some areas of this country are simply funded more than others? They have more resources, perhaps, in urban areas in London?
There's certainly big differences in terms of per pupil funding across the country, and that's one of the contributors to the challenges that we see. But there's also a broader challenge, which is that schools don't all have the same job. We know that students with disadvantaged backgrounds require often more educational support in order to attain well at school. And we're just simply, the funding does not reflect that adequately at the moment. So in places like the North, where you've got concentrations of disadvantage, those should actually be receiving the most funding because they've got the biggest job to do. And if we don't resource them properly now, we all pay much more in the long run through educational failure and the lifelong consequences that has, not just for children individually, but for our economy and society.
Is not one of the problems, and this might be a bit controversial, but isn't one of the problems that there's varying levels of aspiration around the country? So perhaps some children, particularly of perhaps recent immigrants, are very aspirational and really focused on education, whereas we've seen that white working class boys, for example, are often underachieving at school, and perhaps we need to have a boost around the country in terms of aspiration.
I think the interesting thing about aspiration is the way that it interacts with expectations. Often families are incredibly aspirational for their children, but they want their children to be able to live locally if they choose to and actually realise opportunities in their communities. Not every family wants their child to have to move hundreds of miles away in search of a decent job. And I think that the challenge around aspiration is actually meeting that aspiration. So our children have, no less dreams than any other child anywhere else. But what the sad reality is that what parents and children ultimately believe is feasible for them sets in lower than it does in other places where there are more opportunities nearby. And so the challenge is really to deliver on the aspirations that communities have rather than assume that those aspirations are, I suppose, lacking in some way.
Yeah, and it's true that we don't want to have low expectations either. Thank you very much for joining me to talk through those disparities between different areas of the UK in terms of attainment. That was Fiona Spellman, the CEO of Shine Support and Help in Education. Thank you very much. So, now, to finish the show, let's close with Solve the Palaver with me, Emily Carver. Now, I asked you at the start of the show and throughout whether Britain is broken, and if it is, if you agree with that premise, how would you fix it? Now, lots of you have been getting in touch. On Broken Britain, Gary has said, certainly government policy, especially net zero and green levies, have contributed to the problems we are facing, as has under-investing in infrastructure and discouraging fracking. Charlie, that's fracking again.
Yes,
Lots of people want to bring back fracking.
Well, they should. We should bring back any opportunity that Britain has in order to deal with our energy supply crisis. We are blessed with some natural resources. The North Sea oil should be pulverised and brought into this country. And I think we should also be making use of the wind and solar opportunities we have. Everything we have. Everything, absolutely.
We just need to, dig up everything. Even coal, Charlie?
Why not? I mean, why not? I mean, what's more damaging to the health of this nation? Some carbon dioxide emissions or the deaths of thousands of pensioners? I think probably the deaths.
Well, let's hope Greta Thunberg isn't watching this. Anyway, Mark says... Maybe she is, who knows? She might be a GBNews fan. Now, Mark says, Britain is broken, the government lets all sorts in and screws our job prospects up. The country is full of couples with loads of kids and not even ever being married. Gosh, the government introduced an equal opportunities bill which is constantly ignored. The government of broken Britain needs to pull their finger out. Mark actually makes a point about, kids out of wedlock. But that may be something that's also, it may be cultural, but it also may be down to finances, really. I don't know. Weddings are very, very expensive. But perhaps people also need to be a little bit more thoughtful about when they have children, perhaps.
Well, it's very difficult to afford children these days. The dream of a single-parent earner in a family, supporting a family, is pretty much done and dusted in Britain now, unless you are enjoying significant support from the state or your relatives. So, I think I'm very much in favour of anything which happily boosts.
But it seems to me that actually middle-class people like you and myself, Charlie, are putting it off because perhaps we don't want to change our lifestyle.
Yes, I think that's probably...
we want to be able to, spend our money how we like. And perhaps in the past, in our parents' time, they thought, children, and then you have to... scrimp and save.
Right.
Exactly, and you have to forego holidays, which perhaps our generation doesn't want to. Anyway, Vicky says, all this talk and no one acts. We need someone to step up. Presumably, Vicky's talking about the fact that we have seemingly no Prime Minister at the moment.
Yes, and it will continue for a couple more weeks. I'm sorry, Vicky, but your disappointment is set to continue. And even if they do arrive, there may be as much of a damp fish as what we've been dealing with for the last 3 years as well. So I'm sorry, Vicky, prepare to be disappointed.
I mean, to be fair to Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, they're giving it a go. Blimey, I would not want that job. I mean, someone wrote to me saying, have you considered being an MP last week? And I have considered it, and I think it's a no from me. Also, on Broken Britain, Christopher says, how do we fix Broken Britain? It's a multivariate answer that demands many targeted and untargeted economic policies. I'm not sure what that means, but they will help individuals and businesses alike. Yes, we certainly need a multi-prong approach. And Philip adds, what we need is a border force. We were talking about illegal immigration, which, of course, the government is not getting to grips with. He says what we need is a border force that operates in the interests of the UK. We also need a visible police force that actually starts doing its job properly. We've heard all the excuses. They don't wash. Action really does speak louder than words. We also need proper punishments for wrongdoers to help deter crimes rather than trying, and in many cases failing to solve them after the events. Well, Philip certainly thinks that we need to concentrate on crime and punishment.
No, I fully agree with Philip. I very much support the idea of establishing a sentencing commission to review the current situation that we're facing in crime. There are 82,000 prison spaces in England and Wales. We certainly need more than that. I think the current number of prisoners is hovering around the 79,000 mark. There are people who should be there who aren't, and consequently, we all suffer.
Yeah, well, it does look like a lot of people are suffering. Burglaries, violent crime, God knows what, all up. Anyway, we must finish there. I think we may have solved some of the palaver. I mean, it was a pretty big one. Anyway, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Emily Carver, and Charlie Peters, who's been my presenter's friend. Thank you very much for your company. The show is on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. Darren will be back next week. But for now, I'll leave you with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many. A few showers around, mainly in the north. Let's home in on that detail for you. So a dry end to the day across southwest England with some bright or sunny spells ahead of dusk. Remaining a little breezy along the south coast, temperatures around 20 degrees Celsius. And a bright evening too across southeast London. Some hazy spells of sunshine, dry for all, an easterly breeze, temperatures the same, about 20. Continuing with the dry theme this evening for South Wales now, plenty of bright or sunny spells ahead of nightfall, temperatures around 21. And a fine and dry end of the day across the Midlands. Plenty of hazy sunshine ahead of sunset, we're told. Light winds making it feel rather pleasant. Temperatures sat at around 21 as well. A rather cloudy end to the day for the northeast of England, although there will be some glimmers of sunshine. Feeling fairly pleasant despite that cloud. Temperatures around 20 and the wind's quite light. A bright end to the day for southern Scotland as dusk approaches. Light winds and dry weather, feeling pleasant. Temperatures around 17 to 19. On the cloudy side, if we head over to Northern Ireland for this evening, and we're told scattered showers across the country. Some of those on the heavy side. Temperatures about 17. So lots of places across the UK remaining dry overnight tonight. Some clear spells, though a few showers for some in the north. And that's how the weather's shaping up.